you for all of you attending again today. Yes, so we're in another pivotal moment in the city region today with Tier 3 that we are now living with. And I think it's good that we have such a great group today on this panel, so thank you for that. And in the first section, we've got really to look at the perspective of from Liverpool and the Liverpool City region. And if I could come straight to Darren, because I know lots of people will be wanting to talk to you today, Darren, after the £40 million grant scheme that the Liverpool City region has announced is now live. So I just wonder, if you could just briefly talk us through the grant scheme, what it is, who's it for, where does the money come from, and how do people get hold of it? I suppose they're the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I guess first thing to say is I think we all owe a lot of thanks to our leaders in this, to the Metro Mayor, the Mayor of Liverpool, to the leaders of the different local authorities, because this has been a big step in a very short amount of time. I think most people will know that none of the public sector on Merseyside is flush with cash at present, to say the least. So this has very much been a fund that's been assembled by raiding reserves, by borrowing from potential future income as far as the combined authority is concerned. So it's not been easy to assemble. And 40 million sounds a lot, but in reality, given the scale and challenge that the cities and the city regions facing, it's money that's nowhere near enough. And we are continuing to lobby government for more cash to add to this pot, and we will carry on doing so. In terms of this as a fund, first of all, we've made the decision that this needs to focus on hospitality and leisure businesses that have been most affected by the decisions that governments have made to restrict trading. So that's both the lockdown decisions of last weekend, but also the restrictions that happened before that, the rule of 6, the 10 p.m. curfew. Those are the businesses that this fund is going to focus on helping, as well as those businesses that were told yesterday that they could no longer trade. We think 40 million might just be enough to help that group of businesses, but we're conscious that the demands for cash for some businesses will be beyond what we can provide. The detailed guidance has been launched today. It's there on all of the local authority websites. It's not a competition, but I think Liverpool got theirs out first. It is the same set of guidance for each local authority area, and the application form will go live tomorrow, and it's a single application process, but decisions will be made by each individual local authority about who they help and support. So what kind of business do you need to be? You need to be a hospitality and leisure business. You need to be trading direct with the general public. This is not a fund that will support, at this point in time, the supply chain or of the majority of sole traders and freelancers. If we've got money left at the end of this first bidding round, we might look to extend the scheme wider to include a wider range of businesses. You need to be able to demonstrate to us that you've been affected by COVID and the trading restrictions. I suspect that will be relatively simple for the majority of businesses. And your business either needs to be continuing to trade or to have been told by government that you can trade no longer. We will pay on the basis of the number of jobs you employ and the rateable value of the premises that you occupy. And we've stacked the fund so that the more premises that you occupy and the more people that you employ, the more we will pay to you. We will give more grant to businesses that have continuing to trade than we will in general to businesses who've been told that they must cease trading. That's in recognition of the fact that those businesses who've been told to cease trading actually will get additional support from government, although we accept the fact that that support from government is not enough. Once we've approved your application, we will aim to pay you within 10 working days, hopefully a lot quicker than that in most cases. And we will pay you in 3 phases. We will give you 50% of the money up front, and then 2 successive 25% payments over the next 2 months. hopefully that should enable a good number of our businesses to stay afloat and to keep more people in jobs. I accept the fact that it won't be enough. I accept the fact that there'll be a lot of businesses who will be frustrated that we've not been able to stretch the fund further to help them. But ultimately, 40 million can only go so far. And Bill, I'm happy to take any questions that people have.
Yeah, the question there from Bob at ACC, is this the same 40 million? This is the stopgap fund?
Yes. I don't think we've actually formally called it the stopgap fund.
No.
But yes, it is.
It is that, and it is split in across the local authorities, depending on size of business, is it?
Yeah. Well, the way we've worked it out is number of jobs in the sector per local authority area. The combined authority have put 25 million in, and that's been shared across the local authorities. Liverpool City Council have put 10 million in, and that will just be for Liverpool businesses. So we estimate the Liverpool share of all of that fund will be about 21 million.
Thanks, Darren. And this grant money can be used in conjunction with the government job support schemes, either for an ongoing business or the businesses that are closed.
What we've tried to do, Bill, is design this with government's interventions in mind. So the per job calculation in terms of the amount of money that you will get is the average salary in the sector according to the Office of National Statistics, times by a percentage of hours based upon the gap between, so if you think about the standard job support scheme, where government say you can keep somebody on 33% of their hours, and then government will pay 22% of the remainder of their hours as long as you fund the other 22%. Well, for those businesses, we're hoping to give you what the average 22% of your contribution would look like. For businesses that are forced to close, we've used a similar calculation, but government is saying they'll give you 66% of somebody's salary. We believe as a minimum that should be 80%, so we're looking to top that up on an average basis to 80%. So that's how we've calculated those elements of the grant stream.
So effectively here in the city region, businesses who are eligible to apply for it are seeing a continuation of the 80% furlough scheme, which we all believe government should continue with, but they're not listening to that. So city region leaders have stepped in and said, well, we will deliver it.
Absolutely, Bill. I mean, I think the leaders argued strongly over the weekend that this had to be an 80% intervention from government. They were very public about that. I've spoken to 3 of the city region leaders in the past 24 hours, and they're incredibly frustrated that government wouldn't listen and wouldn't move that figure upwards. So we're going to try and fill the gap as much as we can.
Great, thanks, Darren. There are other questions on the grant, but we'll come back to those, and we can answer questions, of course, offline as well, because I want to come to Rich and Donna. And Darren, if you stay on and obviously join in the conversation. Donna, from a Liverpool ONE perspective, well, I've seen in the BID area, which is the area just outside of Liverpool ONE, where footfall's gone since the first middle of September when the first measures came in place, and from our entry into tier 3 on Wednesday, it's only going one way at the moment, isn't it? How are things for you trying to lead Liverpool ONE at the moment?
I think, as you say, when the latest restriction back in September, the rule of 6 first, when that came in, and that's when we saw a sharp change really to performance. So end of September, our footfall volumes, after a very successful summer, all things considered, our footfall volumes by the end of August had pretty much equated to what we would have expected, or what we did receive in 2019 pre-COVID. Rule of 6 came in, other layers, no mixing of households, saw a steady decline throughout September. And then obviously as we enter into tier 3 this week, we've seen a sharp decline further. Yesterday, down significantly, another 10% lost just in one day. And I think the real challenge here is, yes, shops can stay open, restaurants can still trade. We know that it affects directly pubs, bars, casinos and the like. So there are a small number of occupiers within the Liverpool ONE estate that will have to close because of the guidelines around tier 3. But for those that still operate, there's a real focus on people being advised not to travel into the Liverpool City region. We know that people previously were encouraged not to use public transport. People again encouraged to work from home, and all the things that are required to get this virus under control. The focus now is really to try and keep those businesses alive. We want to make sure that those businesses still exist when we do get on top of this virus, and when we do, look ahead to brighter times. I've spoken before and said, this feels as if we kind of came out of lockdown the first time round in a real sprint. This isn't a sprint, it's an absolute marathon. The virus didn't go away. The virus is back to levels that we really hoped we wouldn't see. So we do have to look at what we've seen through the summer is there's a real appetite that, the people of the city, the people of the city region and beyond want to come into our city region and into our city centre. And they showed that in their numbers throughout the summer. We've all had to retreat again. So how do we strike that balance? How do we look beyond tier 3, coming out of tier 3, but then acting in a way whereby businesses can trade with safety at the absolute forefront of everything that they do, and visitors coming into the region, behaving in a way that allows those businesses to continue to trade. But the focus absolutely has to be on, let's make sure those businesses are still there and that those jobs are still there as we work through this incredibly difficult period that we find ourselves in.
So what would be the message from Liverpool ONE to anybody? And we know now it's within the city region because nobody can travel in from outside of the city region at this moment in time. Within the city region that's thinking of coming to Liverpool ONE, what's the message for them?
People have to take responsibility. There's quite a lot in the media about confusing guidelines, no mixing of households, a 10 p.m. curfew. If we step back and think, why are all of these messages being pushed out that do serve to confuse? Many people have lost sight of the absolute basics here. Maintain social distancing, good hand hygiene, and wear a face mask. There's been a very rapid cultural change. We found it hard to adopt those behaviours, the face mask in particular, but you must wear a face mask if you are going out into public spaces and if you are going into a store. That is so important that we recognise everybody has a role to play, everybody has to be responsible. Do they want to be part of the solution, or will they continue to be part of the problem? We have to adopt those basic guidelines, and we found ourselves in the position we're in now because those guidelines haven't been rigorously implemented by absolutely everybody, whether that be members of the general public. And there's a real message to businesses here as well, because we've seen a huge amount of fantastic examples of where businesses have adopted exactly what they need to do. The message to businesses as well is ensuring that those guidelines that they are following front of house when they are welcoming visitors into their domain, those standards have to continue back of house. They have a duty of care to their employees to ensure that they continue to maintain those standards right the way throughout, whether that be in back office spaces, on the journey into work. So it's people standing back now and saying, okay, we are where we are, but what could we have got right? What could we have done better? Or how do we maintain the behaviours that I believe everybody worked so hard on as we came out of lockdown the first time round? And then, as I say, it wasn't a sprint, and we've lost some of the consistency in enforcing those behaviours, and everybody has that role to play. So certainly our message for those people coming into the city centre is, please, you all have a role to play. Follow those guidelines and allow the businesses that can still operate within tier 3 to continue to operate in tier 3, so we can focus on supporting those businesses that can't, to ensure that they are still here, viable businesses with jobs to offer as we move out.
Thanks, Donna. And Rich, if I can come to you, you are, you represent the nighttime economy on the Liverpool Visitor Economy Network, but you are also obviously a businessman with mixed venues. So you operate here in the city centre two great bars, but also you, as we said right at the beginning, you were the co-founder of the Warehouse Project, Parklife. So you have a foot in both camps, and obviously part of your business has been able to operate, but obviously limited, particularly now under Tier 3. But a huge swathe of your business, you've not been able to operate in any way at all. So
Yeah.
what's the impact for you at the moment?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Manchester businesses there. My connection with Liverpool goes back to 1996, and I've been operating and working in nightclubs in the late night sector since probably 1999. Worked with Cream, those guys all the way through, and also Creamfields and our own club nights and things that we've had. I mean, obviously they're all stopped. I mean, no one's open, nothing's happening. That entire industry is made up of self-employed people that are they are maybe not on PAYE, and the support in that world is pretty much non-existent. I mean, I've been lucky this week we got an Arts Council grant, which is going to see us through from that perspective, and we will pass a lot of that money to our employees to keep the wheels turning. From a bar perspective, the Merchant is a very popular city centre bar, but it's been decimated from the same problems everyone else has. So I think Liverpool without walls, coming out of the curfew, we managed to trade very strongly through August. And a lot of other people who had outdoor areas and could benefit from Liverpool without walls also did. But the 10 p.m. curfew just obliterated everyone. Just as the students were coming back, that halved it, 50% hit straight away, and that was pretty brutal. So everything that we made in August that was filling up the hole behind it, that's just it's almost as if it didn't happen now. We've pivoted into more of the pizza end of what we do. So we're serving full substantial meals now if you want to buy a drink. But we've gone from taking 2 or 3 grand on a Wednesday to 400 quid. So we don't know how that's going to play out. We don't know how long it's going to take for consumer confidence returns just on a basic level for footfall. We've got no idea. So we're very much in the dark, and it's very much a punt. I think people need to realize that these regulations aren't just a kind of aren't just stranglehold. It's more like a death grip. It's being open and having these regulations is brutal. It's killing us very, very slowly and painfully, as opposed to if we were just closed and had proper support. I think that would be better. But we're just kind of stuck in between at the minute, trying to weigh it all up.
So it's almost a limbo situation, isn't it? That you are in this, as you say, this having to try and keep going because the support is not there to give you that.
Yeah, I just want to commend obviously Darren and Steve Rotherham, everyone who worked hard on that fund, and I'm kind of learning more and more about it as time goes. Over the last few days, been able to hopefully top the furlough up to 80%. That is a huge thing because people's mortgage holidays are over, their bills won't be halved, and being able to at least get to 80% is going to make a huge difference to people.
Great, thanks, Rich. Darren, there's a couple of questions on the Q&A. If I can just come back to you before we just switch across to Chris and the second half of this webinar. Do you want to just pick up some of those points?
Yeah, Bill, I'll start at the bottom and work backwards if I can find them.
Thanks.
Somebody, I think Joanna's asked about her hotel and occupancy rates. Right now, government are saying that the 67% salary scheme is only there for businesses who government have said must close. But we're currently having a conversation with government about what does that precisely mean. So if you're a hotel that has a bar and your bar has been forced to close, can you close the whole hotel, for instance? If you're a pub that currently sells food but chooses not to sell food, which is obviously within your gift as a business to do, can you then choose to close the business and get not just the 67% furlough fund, but also the grant support that government said they will give to businesses in terms of operating costs? So there's still a lot of conversation with government to be had around who can claim and who can't, and we're trying to get as a maximum flexibility as we can from government on those issues to try and make sure that businesses have got the choice. and Bill, if it's okay, if I use you as a conduit to keep people informed on that.
Yes, that's fine. Happy. We'll continue to do that and use our comms for that.
Brilliant. Somebody's asked about why in the previous grant rounds businesses outside of the city centre were getting grants, and I assume they're referring to corner shops and off licence and places that weren't actually required to close. That was, although the grant flowed through local authorities, that was not our decision to give money to those businesses. That was the government's decision to give money to those businesses. They simply did it on the rateable value of the property. In terms of our fund and our 40 million, what we're saying is that if you were a business that was not required to close by government last time round, then you are not eligible for this fund. So we've acknowledged that issue in government's fund. Somebody's asked how long we think the grant will last for. We've worked on a basis that it should keep a business operational for at least 3 months. But obviously that will very much depend on the individual business situation. So our aim is to try and help businesses get through from now into early next year.
Thanks, Darren. I think that was it. Really, there was a question about businesses outside the city centre. Well, clearly, this support is for businesses outside the city centre if they were forced to close last time. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Darren. Okay, there's lots of questions there. So any further questions for Darren or the grant scheme, either the City Council's website obviously is the first port of call, but we will also disseminate that information. But Chris, if I can pass across to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bill. And Darren, just I think thanks from us and the sector for stepping in and supporting the hospitality sector in the absence of government doing it for you. And good to know you're keeping that dialogue with government moving. So in this sort of part of the webinar, I want to kind of focus a little bit on the national and the kind of thoughts of our close near neighbours over in Manchester. So I'm going to start with you first, Kurt. I mean, you're director of the Tourism Alliance. We work very close to the Tourism Alliance. You've been brilliant throughout the pandemic and keeping us informed on trying to decipher and understand things coming out of government. So in the first instance, where's your key focus at the moment in terms of the work you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Up until recently, it was trying to open up as many businesses as possible and getting them to operate or allow them to operate in a financially viable manner, but the focus has now changed over the last couple of weeks to making sure that support is there for businesses as we get into this second wave of the COVID outbreak. What we're particularly concerned about in very high alert areas like Liverpool is that only those businesses that are legally required to close are actually eligible for support, and there's a very large number of businesses that are effectively closed by the new rules and restrictions that don't have access to that type of support. And it ranges from everything here from hotels. Obviously, people are being told not to enter the area and stay overnight, but through to coach operators, also things like even travel agents being able to sell holidays to people because they're being told not to leave the area. And then behind that, there's the supply chain, and this is especially important when it comes to things like the conference, events and exhibitions sector, which there is a very large infrastructure that sits behind these types of activities. So what we're trying to do for government is come up with a coherent support package for these businesses, because they are viable businesses. They're just not viable while the government has introduced rules and restrictions that limit their ability to trade.
Yeah, and I mean, just building on that, Kurt, I mean, I think we would like to think the government has begun to understand the whole ecosystem that makes this up, and the whole interdependence between the event sector and the hospitality sector, tourism and culture and performing arts and such forth. I'm not quite sure yet they quite get that, but this issue around that Rich was also referring to is that the situation as we currently have, it just seems plaintively unfair. that, because the restrictions being placed upon us mean if you can open a business and run a business, there's just no footfall or business out there for you. And I think, that's really been where the grants coming in from the city and the wider region have helped. But do you feel you're getting any traction with that? Because I think everybody's been making this point, but we just don't seem to be able to get any voice in government to understand it.
Yeah, sure. There's a growing understanding in government, and you've seen that through things like Eat Out to Help Out, the reduction in VAT for eating, accommodation and attractions. But there is still a lot of work that we need to do on, as you say, getting them to understand that tourism and hospitality is an ecosystem where all parts of the ecosystem depend on each other for their survival. And while you may put in place support for some, it's not going to help the ecosystem as a whole if you don't cover off everyone and introduce the support more widely. There's also a bit of a problem we're facing at the moment of government tending to conflate tourism with hospitality and think that they are one and the same thing, and trying to get them to understand that while obviously hospitality is an incredibly important component of the tourism industry, it isn't the tourism industry, and there are large other elements of the industry that equally need support. And the reason they need support is to help businesses in the hospitality industry itself. So there's a greater understanding, but there's a lot more understanding that's needed.
Yeah, and if we look to, hopefully we get to a position as we come out of this survival period, hopefully into recovery. Do you get any sense that the way that the sector will be looked at in the future is going to change for the positive? Do we think that's going to happen, or do you get any sense that there will be the changes required at government level to give this sector a better voice? I saw this morning that a number of people started a petition around, for instance, of creating a minister for hospitality because of the frustration of the current performance from government ministers who are supposed to look after our sector. Do you have any kind of thoughts that things might look better in the future?
I think things will. There has been a want by government to just take domestic tourism for granted, and that no matter what happens, people will always go on holiday and they don't have to actually look at it. And there's also been a view by Treasury that it doesn't actually add anything to the economy. Inbound tourism obviously adds value to the economy, but the view's been that domestic tourism just shifts money around the economy and doesn't add to it. I think there's been a reflection on that within government and DCMS. And I know that as part of the comprehensive spending review, they're looking at allocating a lot more money to domestic tourism, and realise that this is actually an incredibly important component of the UK economy, not just in itself, but also in supporting the government agenda, which is, to level up. And a great way of levelling up is through tourism, because people, go from one area of the country to holiday in another area, and that kind of moves vast amounts of money around the country and helps with the levelling up agenda. So I think there's a recognition of domestic tourism in its own right and supporting wider government objectives.
Okay, and then Sheona, if I come to yourself, I think it's been great to see over the last few weeks and months of the collaboration, particularly across the northern cities, working together against a common set of agendas. We've always enjoyed a good working relationship with yourselves, Liverpool ONE, Manchester and partners. But what's the impact of all this being on Manchester, which has many, also has a very high reliance on the hospitality and tourism sectors. Tell us a little bit about how you found it there and your kind of thoughts about that.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for inviting someone from Manchester over onto your webinar today. I've just got one eye on the other screen because we are waiting on an announcement whether we are going to be joining you on Team 3, but the statement so far is that the meeting this morning was not conclusive. We would not be part of the announcement this morning because there's no agreement being reached, and further meetings will be taken today. So that's quite interesting. So I'll keep my eye on case anything changes. But whether we're in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3, tier 2 doesn't give much hope for the tourism, and right across hospitality and tourism either. Of course, we've been in restrictive measures right through the summer. So most of our local authorities have been in higher restrictions, Bolton and Rochdale in particular. So it's a dire situation for us all, like yours. But estimation for the whole tourism economy, 61% reduction, we reckon, by the end of this year. And that would mean to Greater Manchester a loss of 5.9 billion loss, we reckon. It's a massive loss. And as Kurt said, it's a wide and quite diverse sector. Right across the country, what 10% of jobs are in this sector. And so our ask would be to put a T in DCMS to actually get a minister who actually does stand up in terms of tourism and makes the point on that. I know we have got a tourism minister. It doesn't feel like that in this point of time. So I think it's a dire situation. In terms of footfall, I think echoing what some of the speakers have said today, retail, public realm, nighttime economy was 30 to 40% down on the year, but since the curfew, that's doubled. So the sector and nighttime economy is down about 7% down now. So I think it's the same as yours. Our business visits and events are the biggest hole, I think, in terms of the scar, economic scar. Because in terms of business visits and events and sporting events, they just haven't recovered one bit. So this knock on to tier 2 or tier 3 is just another wound. We haven't got a recovery fund like Darren's we might find you a job over here, Darren. But we're working on that. And as a team, we came together. The one good thing that's come together in the last 6 months is we've been working with an emergency group. So the tier group, it follows the kind of national tier group in the tourism industry emergency recovery. And so we've been working with the likes of the BID, hospitality, all elements of culture, the aviation, transport sector. And so we've got a really good partnership now, and we've been lobbying government with that group. So I think one thing that's come out of this is the weight of who you lobby with helps. We've also joined forces with all of the other business organisations, including FSB and IOD, etc. So 30,000 businesses have been represented in a letter that's gone out this week with the mayor. So, that lobbying stuff is still going on. But in terms of looking to the future, I think we've got a recovery plan. We're going to launch that next week. We've tried to continue with our campaigning. So it's a pretty tough time. We're trying to, though, just get some business back into our partners, whether that be footfall into retail or museums, etc. But the rest of the economy, I think, in terms of the cultural organisations, 61 of them received those grants this week. That's really good news. And other bits of the economy are doing well. Business startups, we've seen a marked increase in business startups, especially in the last couple of months. And on inward investment, some of those sectors are still pretty good. But it's tourism, hospitality and leisure, it's absolutely on its knees. So we're definitely with you on that. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I'm just going to I remember when we did this, we did one of our webinars back in August, which seems a lifetime ago, when we were reflecting on the return of footfall, the return of people through the heat out to help out, and really looking forward to the October the 1st with events being allowed, because that sector has just not had a chance to kick a ball yet. And I'm absolutely flabbergasted that Bill hasn't mentioned the derby so far, which I'm absolutely bemused about, because he's now, since Everton got to the top of the league, he's talked about little else. But the challenge in that space about getting our event sector back up and running, I just cannot understand why they have not been allowed to open with smaller numbers when you can go to the ballet, you can go to the cinema, and how is that? How are you finding that events wise? And I think what can we do working together? Maybe to keep that pressure on getting this events, get some pilot events, get events back on the go again.
Yeah, so pilot events definitely, and especially on the smaller side. But I think the thing that we're asking for and pushing for most is the distinction between business and consumer events, and especially on those smaller ones, because I think we can run some of those and continue to run. Our convention centre is going to go back into a Nightingale hospital, so that, you know, that locks that side down. So I think it's the thing probably that's most silent in this debate, because of the supply chain and all of those freelancers, everyone that goes into events. I think it's something that we could do together and push forward in terms of lobbying. I don't know, Kurt, if you can add to that, but I know that the Business Events Partnership run by Visit Britain have been looking at that and have been pushing the government in terms of those pilot events. I don't know where we are on those, Kurt.
Yeah, it's I actually took part in one of those, which was the conference event, and they did very well. And Public Health England were very impressed with how they were organised. The problem has been that the government has resisted reopening. The basis for the decision is that they're very concerned that people attending conferences will mingle and, you know, network socially, as that's a big part of the conference, and that's the reason why they're treating them differently from things like cinema or theatre, where you can argue that they're basically the same type of event, people going into an auditorium and you know, watching a production. But people who go to cinemas or theatres don't mingle. There's no networking, and that's the component that's holding back the opening. And with things going as they are, I don't see that being revisited anytime soon.
Okay. And Kurt, just before I hand back to Bill, we had a question on the Q&A there around walking tours and their ability to continue. Our understanding of that is fine as long as they follow the rule of 6 process and the safety measures. They are able to continue.
Yeah, exactly. You can still undertake walking tours of up to 30 people, as long as each individual group within the tour is one household and you know, stay socially distanced from other people. In the same vein as hotels or attractions can still have meetings of up to 30 people, provided that the appropriate social distancing is there.
Yeah, which I think it just adds a bit more confusion to the layers, doesn't it? Okay, thanks very much, Kurt. Sheona, I'll hand you back to Bill.
Thanks, Chris. Just picking up, I think some of the last points in the chat before we go on to general questions for all of our panelists today. Someone has referenced the Liverpool Without Walls scheme and suggesting that it's failing because of no footfall. Someone was great. Leaf is closed now. Cafe Tobacco is closed. Well, I know that Leaf and Cafe Tobacco are closing not because of the lack of footfall, but because of the fact that the government support schemes actually force you into closing your business if you want to be a responsible business owner and get maximum support for your employees. This is something that we're flagging up, and Darren has talked about that. In terms of Liverpool Without Walls, I would argue that it isn't failing, and actually is one of the things that's helping our businesses, and we are working on a program to see how we can get Liverpool Without Walls into becoming Winter Without Walls. So we're looking at that at this moment in time. But there is a consultation program that is going out through the city and ourselves to all the businesses. In fact, anybody that wants to talk to us about Liverpool Without Walls, as to whether we keep Bold Street and Castle Street closed permanently, but that will only come following a proper period of consultation. We know that we close them very quickly in the summer because of that specific reason. So really just picking up on that point. Anything else in our chat and Q&A? No, I think we've picked up on all of those generally. So Álvaro, you've got 3 questions that you want our panelists to respond to in 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay, so this will be just a sort of like a summary. You have answered some of those questions anyway, so it's just basically the key idea you want people to go away today. So we'll start alphabetically. So I will go for Darren first. So the first question that we're going to be asking all of you is, what's needed right now from the government, from businesses, and from members of the public?
Okay, government, the obviously screaming thing, money and investment. So a better furlough scheme, more clear support to businesses in terms of finance, and giving businesses some choice about whether they close or whether they stay open, ensuring that they're operating safely. Businesses and members of the public, same thing, compliance, both of them. Stick to the rules. The more we stick to the rules, the quicker we will get out of this together.
Fantastic. We'll follow up with Donna. As I said, well, before, if you all want to just agree with everyone or you just want to add something, jump in. Don't feel forced to follow the order. So Donna?
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely agree with Darren on that. The financial assistance from government is essential. We need to make sure these businesses are still here as we move out of tier 3 and, you know, look to the future of post coronavirus. Businesses, one of the things I'm just going to mention here, we came out with a fighting spirit the first time that we came out of lockdown, and there was a real passion and a real drive. I've noticed as we go through this second wave, which I think we've probably hit sooner than many of us thought we might, there's a real support a real need to support each other. Mental health, anxiety, pressure, the same level of fighting spirit and drive is feeling tough now. Whether you work in those businesses, there isn't a single person that is not affected by coronavirus. And I just call for us all to step back when we all feel ourselves under pressure and we see each other under pressure. And it's the little things we can do to help pick each other up, whether you're an employer and you're looking after your staff, family at home, society in general. It's tough, we know it is, and we're seeing that, but can everybody just take some time to think about how they can change a perspective or just do something small that helps, because it goes back to what we then ask of the public: responsibility and understanding. Everybody has to play a role. Without it, we're not going to come through this. So let's just be aware of everybody's mental health and the anxiety and the pressure that we all operate under, and it will affect everybody, but we can all do something to help that along.
Fantastic. Kurt, what's needed right now?
The call on government is to support the ecosystem of tourism and hospitality businesses. They are viable businesses and they will lead the recovery. The call on the public is to act responsibility. Individual behaviours affect people's jobs. And the advice to businesses is to work with your DMO, work with other businesses, think creatively, because there are things that you can do to increase kind of the revenue that you're able to gain.
Fantastic. I feel like as we go through, it's going to be harder and harder for Rich and Sheona. But Rich, it's up to you now.
I guess just moving on from what everyone else has said is, you know, the government needs to support the nightclub industry and all the freelancers and supply chain and sound companies, all these people that work in this industry, because they have all completely fallen through the gap. And, you know, the support that's come through recently is great, but that's not touching the sides for a lot of the people. And Liverpool is a city that is full of those employees. And I guess, what else from businesses, you know, business perspective, I agree with Darren. It's about compliance and making sure you're working together with everyone rather than, you know, everyone's kind of a bit all over the place at the minute. And I think from the public, people need to really consider, you know, the employees that are out there still working in this sector and what they're going through. You know, leave a tip, be understanding, go an extra mile for these people because they're having a hard time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. Sheona?
And for me, just to add, rather than duplicate, on the government's ask, I would add to that imminent testing at airports, because until we get those international routes up and running, you know, we're just going nowhere. And for us then, for businesses, I think echoing Donna's point about mental health, but the rallying together, not only to keep us all sane, but to also give confidence to our suppliers and our businesses that rely on us and our consumers. So I think that rallying together so that we can build confidence in the marketplace and to get people back in and returning to our cities again is really important. But that international one is a real plea, because I think cities like Liverpool and Manchester can work together to build international gateways again, and multi-city conventions, multi-city campaigns, because we'll need it. As well as this, we've got Brexit down the road. So that's for me.
Second question for you all, and I'll start for Darren again, same order. So it's like something good for the last 6 months that we can actually apply in the next 6 months. In a way, we are better prepared than when this first hit us back in March. So what can we apply for the next 6 months, Darren?
I think it's the strength of partnership working. Sheona mentioned it before about we're stronger in numbers as far as this is concerned. And the number of new contacts, new relationships, new friends that I've made in the past 6 months, despite being, only meeting people through this very strange medium online. And I think we learn a lot more from each other. If we carry on working collectively, we can actually probably build a better future than the one we've come from.
Fantastic. Donna?
Yeah,
any learnings from you?
I think exactly as Darren said, that collaboration, pulling together, we did it right at the beginning, and I think that we came out, of the blocks in a really great place. We know that the virus has caught back up, and it's tough now. We're going through it a second time, but sometimes I find it easier to look back at how we first came out of lockdown. That was when everybody followed rules. That was when everybody followed guidelines. The appetite to continue to collaborate hasn't waned at all. So we have to maintain that sense of collaboration across the city and across other cities in the north. We've learned a lot over the last 6 months, and with the benefit of that hindsight, we can beat this a second time.
Fantastic. What about Kurt, Rich, Sheona?
Yeah, I mean, my big learning has been the Eat Out to Help Out. It shows that underlying demand for tourism and hospitality is huge and remains there, and you just need to put an incentive in place, and people will come back, and we will rebound very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that, Kurt. I think we all need to kind of remain patient and realize that. It's as Donna said earlier, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, and working now on stimulus ideas and techniques for bouncing back as soon as we come out of this, because once we do, it's going to be ferocious, across all the sectors, and we just need to remember that and keep that hope.
Fantastic, Sheona.
And finally, I think the word that we've used, I never used to use it before, called pivot. So we've pivoted loads of jobs. We've done things quicker and more inventive than we've ever been. So I think in the last 6 months, it showed we can be really innovative. And I think that's probably what we need to get out of this.
Fantastic. And then the final question for all 5 of you. How can people support the local economy in the run-up to Christmas? What can we do? What's that little action that we can all take? Darren, I'll go for you, and then the same order.
I think if we can follow the rules in the next 4 or 5 weeks, if we can get the numbers down, if we can get out of tier 3 and into tier 2 and possibly even into tier 1, if we can do it well enough, if people follow those rules, get us away from the situation that we're in now, and then hopefully be able to reopen in time for Christmas.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Donna?
Yeah, obviously Christmas is on the horizon. It's a bid to save Christmas. We know that the final quarter of the year is absolutely fundamental to retail and leisure. And I guess my ask of people is spread where you visit. You don't need to keep going to the same place. It's really important to support independence. It's really important to support city centres. The level of employment and the jobs across the sector is huge. So provided you follow the guidelines, provided you are not being asked to isolate, do not come out if you need to isolate. Follow those guidelines and support the city region. There's a big audience within our city region. We know that people in tier 3 will not be coming into the city region or leaving, but by following the guidelines, get out and support businesses safely.
Thank you, Donna. What about you, Kurt?
Yeah, I mean, my message would be that this isn't a total lockdown. This is just a few more rules being put on top of what we have to do. So people shouldn't retreat into their shells. They should undertake their normal life, but just keeping in mind, the new rules.
Fantastic. Rich?
Yeah, I just sort of echo what Donna said. Really, I think it's bang on. It's going to be tough, but focusing on local businesses and making sure that you put your money in the right place, and that's it. Really, we've just got to focus now and get through this. Keep our heads down.
And finally, Sheona?
I think I would ask everyone to be a local tourist at some point. And so be a Liverpudlian or a Mancunian, visit something at least once in an attraction or whatever's open, obviously within the rules and the guidelines. And better still, why don't you visit Manchester and I'll make sure I visit Liverpool.
Okay, fantastic. Just everyone who is attending today, just remind that as soon as the webinar closes, this very same question will be asked to you. So just make sure you share your ideas, because you can see that in 10-15 minutes, we came across really good input and really good ideas for the next months. So Bill, that's all for me in terms of questioning our panelists. I hope it hasn't been as hard. I'll hand over to you for the closure. Oh, wait a minute.
I think after 7 months, I'd learned how to unmute. That's what we need to understand. Anyway, thank you for that. Thanks, Álvaro. Thank you for your contributions today. There are still some questions in the Q&A and in the chat. We'll pick those up and respond directly to you with those answers. Keep dropping answers, queries that you have to us, and we'll try and respond to all of those. Again, thank you for all your contribution today. I suppose the only message for me is that we did get through the last 6 months, and we know we will get through the next 6 months. But whether we're all together, whether we've got all those businesses through into the next 6 months and into the spring, will depend on each of our own actions. And we know that we need to follow the guidance, be compliant. That's not to be submissive, it's to be compliant and to live our lives as normally as possible, given the imposition that's in place with this virus. We have a great city, and one of the things is, sadly, we're not allowed to travel out of it at the moment, so we can't come to Manchester just yet, Sheona. But those of us who live in Liverpool and the city region can come into the city region and go and enjoy the great facilities, the great attractions that we have that are still open, our museums, our cathedrals, the buildings here in the city. And we will get through all this together. But again, I suppose the final thing is just be kind to each other. Thank you.